and welcome back to Characters Like Us, a podcast where we explore the art of diverse and inclusive storytelling. I'm Gitanshi. I am a South Asian woman in my mid-20s. I am currently wearing a bulky gray sweater, and in my background, you can see a gray couch, bookshelf, and some white walls. I am so excited to introduce you to today's episode guest. Ann Zhao is the indie best-selling author of Dear Wendy and a contributor to the upcoming anthology Being Arrow. When she's not writing, she works in youth and teen services at a public library where she's always finding excuses to put her friends' books on display. Born and raised in Illinois, she lived briefly in Massachusetts for college, but now resides back in the Chicagoland area. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's so great to have you here. I've been following your journey for a couple of years, actually, since one of my college friends introduced me to you. And I am so excited to have you on and talking about Dear Wendy and everything you're up to as a young writer.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
All right. So we're going to open up with our numbered narrative segment where you're going to pick your favorite number between 1 and 30. And I'm going to ask you a fun little bookish question to get us started.
Sure. I will do 12 because my birthday's December.
Ooh, okay. That's interesting. We've had a lot of people pick like the date of their birthday, but no one picked their birthday month so far. Okay, so question number 12 is, what's your reading routine like? When and where do you read?
Ooh, lately, most of my reading happens when I'm at work and it's not super busy. My job is to work the youth and teen desks at the library where I'm at. And when I have downtime, I don't really have anything else that I can do. Whereas my coworkers with more job responsibilities can work on other work stuff. I kind of just have to sit there. And so I do a lot of reading around then. It's just picking up whatever book I'm currently reading at the moment and reading it until somebody comes by and asks me another question. Usually they're asking for a computer pass because everybody goes to the library to play Roblox on the computer.
Oh my God. Well, you know what? I feel like you're doing a great job inspiring them by like sitting there and reading. Like
there are also people who ask about books.
That's okay. That makes sense. Oh my God. I haven't heard the word Roblox in a while.
Oh, it's all the rage.
I feel like it was all the rage like 10 years ago, and I can't believe that's still like the thing that people are doing. I'm really curious obviously I know what you write, but I'm curious, what do you like to read? Is it similar to the stuff you write?
I do like to read the genres that I write. That's why I write them. So I read a lot of YA contemporary, rom-com, mystery. I don't love fantasy as much as I used to when I was younger. I think that it used to be a very escapist thing for me, and now that's not what helps me escape from the world. But yeah, I recently read Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid, as did apparently everybody else in the entire world.
I actually haven't heard of it.
It's her newest book. It is, so she's the one who wrote Daisy Jones and the Six, The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and Atmosphere is unrelated to either of those books as far as I can tell, but it is also a historical novel set in the 80s about a group of astronauts who are training to go into space. And the main character, Joan, is one of the few women who's been chosen to be a part of this program. And she falls in love with one of the other astronauts in the program, also a woman.
Ooh.
And their relationship is like the primary thing that drives the story. But what I loved about it was that on the side, not really on the side, because it is a very pivotal part of the story, but Joan has a niece named Frances, and Joan's sister, who is Frances's mom, is like not the best mom in the world. And so Joan like finds herself having to pick up the slack and help take care of Frances a lot of the time. And the love that she has for her niece is so beautiful to me. Like the fact that she will do anything for this girl is I was like sobbing towards the end of the book because of this.
This sounds actually really good. I might have to check it out.
Yeah.
I really, really love, and I'm sure you can relate to this, but I really love books that have really strong relationships and love between characters in like a non-romantic setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I don't read a lot of books that are about like parents or parental figures. So this was like a sort of fresh, new type of story for me.
yeah, I really don't think I've ever read, like, I feel like the last book, this is going to sound so unhinged, but I think like the last book I read where I can think of like aunts and uncles and the relationship between them and like their nieces and nephews is A Series of Unfortunate Events, which is not the vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also really liked The Gunkle by Stephen Rowley. It's
I've
a
heard of
lot
that
more
one.
lighthearted than Atmosphere. It's about this like actor who is gay, hence being called the Gunkle. And he has to take care of his niece and nephew because their mom like just recently died. And he's like figuring out his whole grief while the kids are also, but it's also very funny and silly. And the kids are so well written.
Ah, I love that. Speaking of well written,
Mm.
can you talk about your debut novel, Dear Wendy, and your writing journey?
Yeah, of course. So, for those who are unfamiliar, Dear Wendy is a young adult contemporary novel. It follows two college students named Sophie and Joe, and they both run Instagram accounts that give anonymous love advice to people who go to their school, which is the school that I went to because I'm not a very creative person in that sense. And what they don't know is that even though their online accounts are feuding with each other over the type of advice that they're giving, they're actually becoming really close friends in real life and bonding over their aromantic asexual identities.
I absolutely loved this book. I have never seen, I think this was the first book I'd seen any Arrow Ace or like a spec representation, period. And I also just like loved the concept. It was so fun. And I recommended it to a ton of my Arrow Ace friends, and it was really special for them as well. And I just think it was such a powerful, amazing, funny book that you wrote. And I'm really excited to hear what the journey was like getting there, especially publishing it. Like you wrote this while you were in college, inspired by your like college surroundings, which is incredible.
Yeah. So I started writing this book when I was 19 years old or so. I got the idea for it kind of on a random night when I was about to fall asleep and it just popped into my head like a race person giving love advice. I had just recently read Perfect on Paper by Sophie Gonzalez, which is about a bisexual girl who gives love advice to her high school classmates. And I think that, a queer person giving love advice was on my radar. I was thinking about it. And obviously it is not very much like Perfect on Paper. Because that was just a very, very tiny part of what eventually became Dear Wendy. But that was where I took a lot of my inspiration. And I also had probably a few months before that, I read Loveless by Alice Oseman, which
Oh my
is,
gosh. Yes.
it's about a first year college student in the UK who comes to realize that she is a Ace because she she spent her whole life like really loving romance and being surrounded by people with amazing love stories. But then when she tries to have one of her own, it like doesn't work. And she slowly figures out why that is. And again, Dear Wendy isn't exactly like that because Sophie and Joe are both pretty confident in their identities already at the start of the book. But that's also a big factor in how I was inspired to write this. So I drafted this book for the next 3 months or so.
3 months? Wow.
Yeah, well, that was the first draft. And it was also 2020 to 2021. So everything was under lockdown. I didn't have like any social life or extracurriculars or like anything really. For most of that time, I was also at home in the very bedroom where I'm sitting now. Because at Wellesley, they had first year and second year students on campus the first semester in the fall. And then they had the upperclassmen on campus in the spring. And so,
Oh, interesting.
and that was just so that the housing had enough space that no one had to live in a double.
Okay.
But so because of that, I was at home for the spring semester of that year. And so I didn't even have any friends I could hang out with really because most of my hometown friends were not home. And so I had a lot of free time on my hands. And so I drafted Dear Wendy super, super fast. From there, I spent a number of months revising it. I had some author friends look it over and beta read it for me. And then I started querying agents with it the summer of 2021. And I need to back up for a bit because I'd actually written a book before this and I had tried to query that book before this. And that book, I think I wrote like right when COVID lockdown kind of happened. And that was when like everyone had so much time. But it also was not a very good book. I did not get an agent from it, but I did have a few agents who told me like they liked my voice, but this story just wasn't it for them. And so when I started querying Dear Wendy, I sent it out to at least a couple of the agents who gave me that sort of feedback. And one of them got back to me really, really quickly. And so I only took like a couple of weeks, I think, after starting to query Dear Wendy to get an offer from an agent.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. But in reality, I was querying for probably like 6 to 8 months before that with the previous book that I had worked on.
That's wow. That I was actually going to ask you as well. So had you been working on writing and knowing that you wanted to be a writer for a while before even like starting on Dear Wendy then?
Yeah. So I definitely wanted to write a book someday since like late in high school, I want to say. And then like when COVID lockdown happened, I was in a very fortunate situation where I had the time to actually do all of that. And so I finished my first novel in like the summer of 2020 and revised that for a while, queried that for a while. I don't know necessarily when I decided, like, yes, I want to try to get my work published, but it just sort of happened eventually, I guess. It was 5 years ago. I don't remember that all that well anymore. And also, like, COVID lockdown was just such a blur.
Yeah, I relate to that for sure.
Yeah. But so that was around when I started like seriously working on writing. And so Dear Wendy, I got an agent in summer of 2021, just before I was about to start my sophomore year.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I feel like that's really indicative of just how how long it takes between like when you get an agent and when like a book is finally published, because I think I remember you promoting the book when you were like a senior in college and it was like
Mm-hmm.
about to come out then maybe.
Yeah.
And so it took like between when you like got your offer and got an agent, it then took like another 2 years for like it to be coming out, or 3 years
Yeah,
maybe.
3 years almost. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's honestly a pretty fast timeline as far as things go, because
Really?
I mean, for some people it really takes like years for them to get an agent and then years for them to get a publishing deal. And for me, it was less than a year between finishing Dear Wendy and getting an agent, and then between getting an agent and getting a publishing deal for me. And that was because a lot of things all fell into place at once. It's like not super typical for all of that to happen so quickly.
How long did it take between when you got the agent and then to get the publishing deal?
Let's see. I signed with Jennifer in August, like late August of 2021. So, like about 4 years ago now. And then we revised the book for a few months. And then it was November. And that's like not always the greatest time to be sending an unknown debut author's book to publishers, because they're all about to go on holiday vacation. So we waited until January of 22 to send it out to publishers, and then got the offer from Macmillan in like late February of that year. So like about a month later, which
Wow.
again is like really, really fast. And that was entirely because of the way that my editor for Yancy like tackles her inbox of submissions. She starts a new queue. I don't know if she still does this, but she would start a new queue of submissions from every calendar year that she received them. And so she would be looking at stuff from January of that year at the same time she was still looking at stuff from like, I don't know, June of the previous year.
Oh, wow.
And so by waiting until January, it really was actually helpful to have eyes on it faster, just because of the way that my editor specifically works through her inbox.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. And so she got to it really quickly. And then we got the offer from Macmillan, and I was able to announce it like a month later, which was really awesome.
Wow.
Sometimes you have to wait until you've signed the contract to announce it. Sometimes you have to wait until you get paid or something to announce it. But I was able to just like tell people kind of right away. And yeah, so from there, it was about 2 years between getting the offer and then the book finally coming out, which is a pretty typical timeline for a debut novel. It takes a lot of time to go through edits and copy edits and proofreads and the cover creation. And then there's also all this marketing and publicity stuff to do. And obviously, like the promotion cycle for a book doesn't end when it comes out. Like I still have had to do events for it since then. I just had one last weekend as of the day we're recording this. But yeah, that's a very shortened version of the timeline.
That's really cool. It's cool to get insight into the behind the scenes of where it goes from like draft to getting published and what are the intermediary steps in between there. I'm really curious, since you mentioned that you drafted this novel and were working on it, in your bedroom during lockdown. I'm really curious about what was your community like during this time, like specifically your writing community, and also, I guess, the community you had supporting you as you were working this novel, not necessarily writing, but possibly writing.
Yeah, I made a lot of friends on Twitter back when it was called Twitter and when Elon Musk didn't own it. And a lot of writers were on Twitter. It kind of makes sense that writers would choose Twitter as their main social media because it is a text-based form of
I never
socialness.
thought of that before, but you're so right.
And so I made a lot of friends through there. And I also applied for a couple of mentorship programs. I didn't get into any of them, but one of them one of the mentors that I applied to did a critique partner match where they matched up authors with similar stories that had submitted to them. And we're kind of just like, here, you guys can connect and get to know each other and maybe help each other with your books. And so that was how I met a few people that I know. That was how I got close to my friend Sydney, who I'm still friends with, Sydney Langford. They wrote The Loudest Silence.
I love them. I've read The Loudest Silence and I loved it. And they're actually going to be a guest later on.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, everyone should read The Loudest Silence. It is a fantastic book. And everyone should also pre-order Someone to Daydream About, which is Sydney's next book. But yeah, so I met Sydney on Twitter and we got to know each other better after being matched as critique partners along with some other people. And I met other people through being friends of friends or through like a writing Discord server that I was a part of. And that was sort of like how I had a community. It was just like entirely online stuff. But it worked out pretty well. There were a decent number of people around my age who were also writing books. I think we probably all had a similar experience of like being in high school and COVID shutting down everything, or like being in college when this happened and deciding to really get into writing around then. And so I was able to get a lot of feedback and hear a lot about publishing resources from the people that I was following on Twitter and who were also following me back. I don't know. There were probably other ways that I made friends too. It was mostly like Twitter, Discord, or like knowing someone who connected me with someone else. And then like in real life, I feel like not so much when I was first drafting Dear Wendy, but like once I had an agent and it was my sophomore year of college, I started to really make close friends with like a core group of people. And so, especially the ones who also read books were like very supportive of what I was doing. So that was really great. I also started to meet more people who were on the ACE and ARO spectrum. We, at the time, did not have an A-Spec club at the school, but one of my friends helped to start it back up. And that's really funny because when I wrote Dear Wendy, I was writing it under the assumption that the club would never be back. And so that was how Sophie and Joe could start their club.
Oh my gosh.
But the timelines diverge between between when I wrote the book and real life at some point.
That's amazing. I totally remember that as a plot line in Dear Wendy. And it's funny that you wrote that before it actually happened in real life.
Yeah. It was pretty cool. I honestly didn't participate in that club as much as I should have, but I was so busy with Dear Wendy that I didn't have a lot of time for extracurriculars. I kind of only did like one or two things by the end of being in college because I was so consumed with Dear Wendy and also with writing my senior thesis.
Right.
So, but yeah, I feel like in college, like I met most of my friends through like living in the same dorm or being in the same clubs or like being in the same classes, knowing someone who knows this person who knows this person. And I feel like that's the great thing about a liberal arts college, as small as Wellesley is, because you end up just getting to know a lot of people simply because there's no other people to get to know.
As somebody who went to like a really huge, I guess like STEM focused public university, yeah, can't relate, but that sounds really ideal. I am really, I've been wondering and also have had some listeners ask me to ask you this question that, you've touched on this already, but being aro ace can be a really isolating experience. And you've mentioned some things about like, meeting those people in your life as time went on, but really curious to share what are the different ways and avenues in which you found that aro ace community.
Oh gosh, I feel like a lot of it has just been like making friends with somebody and then figuring out later on that we're both aro ace or
It's like
some
that, we like
combination.
attract, I don't know, people of like identities attract each other, even if they don't like, aren't like conscious of
Yeah.
that.
Like my core group of author friends, I think all of us are like somewhere on the ace spectrum.
I
And
love
that was like
that.
completely by accident. Like I didn't know going into it. But I feel like there's a lot more of us out there than people realize, and there's a lot more people who like have a life experience that could be labeled as some form of being ace or aro, but they don't need that label to understand themselves, and so they don't label themselves as such. But you can still find some commonalities and similarities with those people. And so I feel like it's, even though it feels really hard to find that community, like it kind of just happened for me that a lot of people that I knew could relate to some of my experiences.
That's really cool. And do you feel like that I'm really curious about, we have authenticity readers these days,
Mm-hmm.
which is really cool. I'm curious if you had people of other like writer friends who were also aro ace read your book and kind of comment on the
Mm-hmm.
representation.
I didn't ask anyone to read for authenticity specifically, but definitely some of my beta readers were also on the aro ace spectrum. And so I was able to get some feedback from people who had similar experiences or like differing experiences. And that was pretty helpful. But I didn't have any authenticity readers for that. Although Macmillan did hire some authenticity readers for some of the characters in the book.
Oh, okay.
So for, I think, Joe, and then Sophie's roommate Priya, and then Joe's roommate Leanne, and then like Sophie and Priya's friend Alicia, I think. But basically like people from backgrounds that were not like a majority or of one that I have. They had somebody look through and just comment on like little details that I would have missed.
That's really
So like
cool. I
yeah,
didn't realize that they did that for, I guess, like, obviously these are important characters in the
yeah.
book, but it's really cool
I
to
mean
know
I
that
asked
they,
for it.
oh, that's
Yeah.
amazing. Okay.
Um
Do you think it
I
was
don't
only
think
done because you asked for it?
I wonder if they would have done one for Joe anyway, because so Joe is non-binary and uses she/they pronouns, and I don't. I mean I've considered it in the past, but I ultimately was like, no, I am a she/her cis woman, and so they had somebody read for that, and Joe also is of like distantly Jewish descent. That was entirely because I found the last name Ephron and was like, I like this last name, and then realized later on that that is a Jewish name, and I was like, okay, let's just add that in there.
Yeah.
But so the reader that they found for that is also of Jewish descent. And it's not a very important part of the book at all. And my literary agent's husband is also like non-practicing of Jewish descent, and so she also
Uh-huh.
like had some comments to make there. Um, but yeah, I feel like they would have found one for Joe probably, but maybe not necessarily the other characters if I hadn't asked.
Yeah.
I had almost wished that they found another like Chinese American person to talk about Sophie, because I don't want to be like the authority on Chinese American experience, but also like it ended up being all right in this case. So I mean that's kind of that. But I feel like Macmillan has been decent about getting authenticity readers if I ask for it, because like Sydney said that they also had authenticity reads for someone to daydream about, which is also published by an imprint of Macmillan. So
that's cool. And yeah, I think it's really great that they do that. And I've been wondering what that process looks like in publishing.
yeah,
And so
I think they have just like a database of freelancers that they contact when they need something done.
yeah, that makes sense. So are you currently working on another novel or
I
what's going
am.
on?
Yeah. So, I mean, like I have nothing official happening right now. Like I have nothing else under contract except for my short story in Being Aro. But I guess I can talk about that. Being Aro is a sequel, spinoff, I don't know, like companion book to Being Ace, which is an anthology that came out about a year or two ago, edited by Madeline Dyer, and published by Page Street. And it's just an anthology of stories featuring ace characters. And so Being Aro is just going to feature aromantic characters. And my story in it is about a girl who it runs a school ride fundraiser for her school robotics club called the Hatch Match. Their school is called Hatchburg. And there's a bit of a mishap with the results that year. And that somehow spirals into her figuring out that she might be Aro Ace. It makes more sense once you actually read the whole story.
I'm excited to read it. I read in the description that it's a collection of stories from many different genres. Is your story a contemporary story?
Yeah, so mine is a contemporary story. I think a lot of the other authors in it also write like sci-fi, fantasy, speculative, historical, like all different genres. And so I'm excited to see how it turns out. I've only read my own story in it. I don't know what the other people's stories even will be, but I am excited. And it's currently slated to come out in May of 2026. I mean, things move around in publishing, so I can't say for sure, but that's the current set release date for it.
I'm so excited to read it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and you said
yeah, sorry. I'm also working on some novels right now, but
some novels. Wow.
I have 3 projects going on, and none of them are under contract at the moment, and none of them are like things that I can like seriously very much talk about, for fear of them never actually getting published and getting people's hopes up. But yeah, there's a YA rom-com, a YA mystery, and then something else that I'm not really sure what to call it yet.
Ah, that's so exciting. And we were chatting about this a bit earlier, but alongside writing right now, you are working at a public library and about to start grad school. Your writing life and also just your goals for the future.
Yeah, I have always loved libraries. I went to the library a ton as a kid. I volunteered at my home library for the summer reading program for more than one summer. And so I thought for a really long time that I was going to get a PhD in linguistics and become a linguist and like be a professor at some sort of college teaching linguistics. That's what I majored in college. It's what my thesis is about. And I love linguistics very much. Don't get me wrong. But the job market for linguists right now is not super hot, as one might say. So when I was, when I had just graduated and I was kind of figuring out next steps, I was like, do I want to do a very intensive PhD for the next like 5 to 7 years and possibly not be able to get a job after that? And also have to do all of that while writing books? Or do I want to see if any other careers might be a possibility for me? And so I started looking into other careers and I landed on library work because it kind of just made a lot of sense. I had spent a lot of time working in libraries already as a volunteer. And then later I worked at a library shelving books. And then I worked at my college library processing interlibrary loans. ILL is also like the best thing ever, and you should all look into it. Your public library very likely does it, and you can get way more books than you think you can because you can request it through ILL.
And ILL is interlibrary loans, right? Okay.
Yeah. And so it kind of just made a lot of sense. I already had the job history, and I also really love libraries. And so I started applying for library jobs and ended up at the library where I work now in the youth and teen department. And then I was like, well, I really like doing this, so I'm going to apply to do a master's because what people don't know a lot of times about libraries is most of the people who work there are not full title librarians. They are assistants or associates or clerks or whatever the job title is at that particular library. But the librarians get to do a lot more work than the associates, clerks, assistants, what have you get to do. So I really want to get more involved and have more responsibilities and also like learn more about how libraries work, the history of libraries. I really like my job in youth and teen services. So I'd also love to learn just more about like children's literature, child development, all of that sort of stuff.
That's amazing. And so you're pursuing your master's in library science, is that correct?
Yeah. The program I'm doing is through the University of Illinois, which I chose because I would get in-state tuition, and also because it is a very good program. Like it is, I mean, like rankings like are stupid.
I agree.
But it is ranked number one of all of the Masters of Library Science programs in the United States. And it also like specifically is ranked number one for youth services.
Wow.
So, I mean, like it worked out well that like it's the cheapest option for me and also like the best option career-wise. But like libraries don't really care where you got your degree as long as it's an ALA accredited degree. So really, I could have applied anywhere, but this is what I ended up with. And I'm very excited to get started soon. I mean, by the time this podcast comes out, I probably will be in my program.
You definitely will be because I think this will come out in early September. And yeah, both of our programs for me start again. And then you are going to be starting next week, which is so exciting.
Yeah.
So before there's so many more questions I want to ask you, but we're kind of running out of time now. So I'm going to close with our closing segment question, which I personally is my favorite question to ask everyone. So this podcast is called Characters Like Us. And I like to ask everyone this question before leaving. And that is, what would you say to someone who sees themselves in the characters that you have written?
In Sophie and Joe specifically, if you see yourself in Sophie, I need you to chill out a little bit. She's a lot. I wrote her to be a little bit much because I can be a little bit much sometimes, but also I need to chill out a lot of the time. But also if you see yourself in Joe, like you should be a little less chill, maybe. Because sometimes humor is not the best solution to every problem that you have. But also so like on a serious note, like I see you, you're doing amazing. And if you are a Ace and looking for more community, more friends out there, they exist. You might have to do some work to find them, but you definitely can. And life is really amazing when you don't have to be on a dating app.
That's going to be like the tagline of this episode. Life is really amazing when you don't have to be on a dating.
Listen, last night, I was talking to one of my high school friends about her dating life. And the whole time I was like, I can't believe that like people stress this much over like their Hinge dates. But also I get it. But I'm also like, oh my God, this is a lot.
Yeah, it totally is a lot. Well, thank you, Anne, so much for coming on. It was so lovely to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. It was
Of
amazing.
course. And thank you for listening to Characters Like Us. Make sure to look up Anne on Instagram at Ann Zhao _. And also be sure to look out for the forthcoming short story collection, Being Arrow, which will be out next year. Also, you can get her debut novel, Dear Wendy, from our bookshop page linked below to support the podcast and also indie bookstores. To stay connected with Characters Like Us, you can follow us on Instagram at Characters Like Us Pod. If you enjoyed this episode and want to support the podcast, please consider joining our Patreon. As a paperback patron for $5 a month, you'll get access to episode-specific reading lists, monthly co-writing Zooms, and our community Discord. Or you can become a hardcover hero to receive writing advice from each episode listed out, help shape future guest lists, and also get a personal thank you in our show notes. You can find the link to everything I have just mentioned in the show notes. And thank you once again, Anne, for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you so much.
And I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.